Okay, I want to take a moment to talk about Lee Bowyer because what he's doing at Charlton, what he's done since the day he walked into the job, but especially what he's doing now in the Championship is extraordinary. He's basically a tactical wizard. I'm not joking when I say that what I'm seeing so far suggests that this is a guy who could probably be managing at Champions League level as in terms of a tactician. Now, basically, let's put this into context. So far this season, Charlton are operating on about a 39% XG ratio, borderline relegation standard. And in the 11 matches they've played in the Championship, they've lost the XG battle in 9. But as we sit here, after 11 matches, they've won 5, drawn 3 and lost 3. They're on, 18 points from 11 games. Over the course of a season, I mean, it's, where they are now, mid-table, is just astonishing. And if they can keep this up, most people, when you look at this, most people will look at the data they've projected so far, and we'll look at the results and say, just that cannot last, and it won't last, and, that they should really be in a relegation battle. Regression's going to bite them. They're going to struggle, and, get ready now for the big slump on Charlton. Lee Bowyer doesn't think it's coming, and when he says he doesn't think it's coming, I don't think it's coming. Now, what you need to understand with Bowyer is all the things that have been thrown at him. Going back to last January, losing Carl and Grant to Huddersfield, that was meant to be the end of their promotion bid. They were meant to drop out of the top 6, and the main source of creativity and goals had gone out of the team. He turns Lyle Taylor into a legend. Now Lyle Taylor's out injured. He has a look at his options. He mixes and matches, and now they've gone and beaten Leeds and drawn 2-2 at Fulham without, the focal point of the team that would have just derailed almost anyone else. Now, for me, this is a demonstration of introverted thinking. Basically, Lee Bowyer, like so many football managers, used to play central midfield. A lot of players who turn to management and prove to be relatively successful, a disproportionate number play central midfield. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's down to the fact that they see the big picture. They relate to every other player on the pitch. If they're a thinking manager and they map things out in their head over the course of an extended career, Bowyer's played hundreds and hundreds of games at a very, very good level, including the Champions League. And, managers that play central midfield think about the relationships with full-backs, they think about the relationships with centre-backs, they think about the relationships with strikers. All areas of the pitch, at some stage in their careers, if they're thinking types and logical types and the type of players that like to work out the patterns and how everything fits together, then basically they gain a hell of a lot of knowledge over their careers about, all aspects of a tactical game plan. And Bowyer's, using introverted thinking, can just pull this knowledge out of thin air. He doesn't have to document it. It all stays neat and tidy in his mind, because that's how extroverted thinking works. It's kind of the difference between, documenting information and plotting it out and working in a linear step-by-step fashion, where that is how extroverted thinking works. But in terms of introverted thinking, it's random access, like the way computers work. It's almost like computer source code. And what seems to happen is with Lee Bowyer is no matter what problem you present him with, his answer's normally the right one, even if that's deferring to other people to do the job for him. For example, Johnny Jackson is supposedly, working on all Charlton set pieces. And so, he should take some of the credit for some of the results that they're getting when they're winning games by set plays and so on. But the point is it's down to Bowyer to make the decisions, and he seems to, in any particular given situation, land upon the single most correct decision that he can make in that situation. And what we're finding ourselves is now that Charlton are in a position where, they're being so stretched, they've lost the main striker. And, they're already sort of, they've not got the biggest squad, so the demands are really, taxing them, potentially. They're not working with as good a resources as almost any other club in the division. And yet Bowyer keeps coming up with answers, and we find ourselves in a situation where they've just beaten Leeds 1-0, they've gone away to Fulham and drawn 2-2, and in both games they have made the opposition change formation. You know, Marcelo Bielsa has held his hands up after the Leeds game and said, you know, they got their game plan right, we had to adjust, we're struggling to impose ourselves on the game because of their tactics. You know, that's credit straight away from one of what's known as one of the best tacticians in the world. And then likewise at Fulham, Bowyer said, I went to watch Reading play Fulham in the build up to Charlton going to Craven Cottage, and he said Reading just sat off, and you know, we went and pressed them high. We went and engaged them, and we were brave with our tactics. And basically, you know, Bowyer's right when he says that we're going to get points in this division because so many games at this level are settled on fine margins, and what we do is always different. Tactically, our approach is we're difficult to predict because whatever we're going to do, it's going to be different. It's not necessarily what's expected. We think long and hard about we approach games, and we don't do the predictable thing because that's what opponents are expecting of us. So even if the shape doesn't necessarily change from game to game, Bowyer's a manager that's able to think outside the box and come up with something completely sort of unforeseen, and really put opponents on the back foot in terms of, you know, having to think about their own game because they're not getting to play the game that they want to play. Charlton have lost the XG ratio, the XG in 9 out of 11 matches. But I'd say it's probably the reverse in terms of the number of games that have been played on Charlton's terms for the first 45 minutes, the first hour. You know, teams are consistently having to change their shape, having to think and do something different because tactically they're just being outthought from the beginning of the game. And I just think this is happening far too often now since Lee Bowyer's been in that job for it to be coincidence. And when people look at the numbers and the data and think, well, Charlton are going to regress, they've got to regress. Yes, there might be some regression, you know. Is it luck, is it talent? It's always somewhere in between. And there's a lot of talented judgment going into this, you know, that Charlton are outperforming their XG to such an extent. And I think, you know, I just think it's Bowyer has got a huge potential in the game. My only concern is that, you know, when you use introverted thinking as a process, it needs buy-in from the players, and it's not natural for an introverted thinking manager to get that buy-in automatically. You know, this is about people skills normally to get buy-in, but Bowyer, by his own admission, says he can't thank the players enough because they're buying into what he's offering them so much. You know, they're listening to what he's saying, and they're really executing it with everything that they've got. They're not holding back in anything. They're not doubting what he's asking of them. They're not really questioning it. They're just going out there and giving 100% every week, giving him everything he can. He says, I'm bored of saying it now every single week. They're just giving me everything. I kind of love them all to bits, which, you know, is fantastic, and doesn't necessarily mean that in his next job, whenever that would come, that the same would apply, because the players might not buy into him, might doubt him, and, you know, might not necessarily, you know, he'd have a lot more to contend with in terms of the dynamics of a dressing room. But in terms of tactical judgment, I'm really struggling to think of a better manager that's come through the EFL in recent years. I think he's the real deal, and I think, like I say, I think we're talking about a manager that has the potential to be, you know, top 4 Premier League standard in terms of his ability to judge situations in the moment and just immediately adapt with the single best judgment that anybody could make.